video, and today I'm going to be talking about Beetlejuice and The Killer 2024, which is basically a case of big directors going back to their famous works in different ways. Now, Tim Burton made a sequel and John Woo made a remake, but they're not quite the normal takes on this material that you expect. Because the remake in John Woo, it actually just feels like it's a similar story to the original, but it's not exactly the same story, it's not exactly the same characters. They've changed everything around quite a bit. So it just feels like it's taking a certain template that Woo likes and did another film out of it. It does not feel like it's a shot-for-shot remake or anything. It feels like it's just like, I like this setup, I'm going to do a different film based on this setup, and we'll change everything around and see what we can do with it. And Beetlejuice is a sequel that does not try and be the original. So you've got this sense of these are two directors who, yeah, they're turning to some of the massive hits of yesteryear, but they're not trying to do the lazy thing with it. So I like both of these films. I prefer Beetlejuice, but The Killer is also very good in lots of ways. But it's got a bit more flaws in it. I mean, both films are flawed, but Beetlejuice is probably a little bit less flawed. Mainly because it actually throws its flaws up on screen and doesn't care. Because Beetlejuice, the impetus is, it's almost like an anthology film with a narrative that flows through it. But it is very much based on what happens to the characters from Beetlejuice 30 years later, what's happened to them. But it's also got this thing of you're following different stories through this setup where they return to the house from the original and haven't been there for a while, and they're there for a funeral of the Charles Dietz character from the first one, who was Jeffrey Jones, but they couldn't use him because of certain charges against him in intervening years. So they find a way around that for having the character killed off. Sort of. We'll get to that. And then they use that, and everyone's got their own little story within that situation, including Beetlejuice, and these stories kind of interweave and eventually come together. In a way, it's a lot like Batman Returns. But Batman Returns, even though it's different in lots of ways too, Batman Returns is that same plot line where it's like, we've got all these characters and they're just going to interweave with each other and they're going to interact, but there's no real build to a massive ending. It's just like there's an ending, there's a character-based ending. In Batman Returns, it's a bit more melodramatic, but it still doesn't feel like it's really high-stakes situation. It's much more like these are weird ideas we're following. And yeah, supposedly people are in danger, but it's not really about that. It's about the strangeness and the weird character moments. And this film is the same thing. As like you're following characters interacting, and slowly it all comes together. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter so much. And it's like you're not meant to take the stakes in this film that seriously. They're not. Most of the stakes are built up, set up, and then thrown away within a couple of minutes. It's not. There's no sustained threat. Even the sustained threat is kind of ignored for half the film. It's that kind of slapdash feel. But it doesn't matter because it's all about the characters and how weird they are, and that's what the film's about. So the setup is Charles has died, they go back for a funeral, but you see them in their lives before that, where Lydia is now in her 50s and she can see the dead, and it's not been easy for her. She's been married, had a child, the child's grown up, from Jenna Ortega. She's divorced from the father, and the father ended up dying in Amazon, which leads to a great gag later on. And basically, her and her daughter are estranged, in the sense of she's kind of hit a low point in her life where she's kind of allowed herself to be manipulated by this character called Rory, who is played by Justin Theroux, who's made her a big TV star because she can see the dead and things like that. But it's not really what she wants to be doing. And she's been manipulated into basically becoming someone she's really not. And it's about her trying to kind of get through the cloud of her life and actually sort of take charge again. But because it's a Tim Burton film, it's not really done in that kind of dramatic way. It's much more like she's just slowly putting things together. She's kind of in a fugue state in her head in some way. She just goes along with things rather than questioning things, and it's like it's interesting because it's like it's a thing that a lot of films have been criticised for recently, where they take beloved characters and make them complete losers. This one is that's kind of the point, and it's not about being a winner. It's just about realizing your failures and moving on from that, and actually dealing with the failures. And then it's like, okay, I've dealt with that. I'm not amazing, but I've reached the next step. So it's a much more human take on it. It's like it's not trying to be say the characters are amazing in the first place. It's like they're humans who made mistakes, which is a nice approach, because the daughter, if they'd done her to be a she's always right thing, it would have been really infuriating. Instead, she's just another character who is making mistakes too, which aren't had different from what her mother made, mistakes her mother made in the first one, but they're not exactly the same either, because it's a sequel, it's not just a remake. And so, instead of making her like the perfect daughter, she's grumpy, she's intelligent but grumpy, and she falls for someone, and because she's so mad at her mum, she doesn't see the signs that this guy is kind of a psycho. And she's so railing on her mum for not noticing this guy Rory is a con man. She misses her own mistake. Which I've all seen that in life. And you've also got the mother from the first one, the stepmother, Delia, and who's played by Catherine O'Hara, who's still the same, still an artist, she's still a crazy artist. And they play that up as well, but it's also she's 30 years later. She's still insane, but she's a bit more human now. She's actually learned to accept Lydia's character, and she's learned to accept her own place in order a lot more. That, you know, like she wasn't nice to Lydia, and Lydia wasn't nice to her. And the idea is they set it up so that it's not that one person was perfectly right and the other person was perfectly wrong. It's like, no, they were both flawed. That's the best thing in the film, is no one's elevated to be like a perfect creature. It's like everyone's got their flaws and they've got their little storylines they're trying to work out. So for the daughter, it's like she finds that she's not as perfect, not as smart as she thought she was. Yeah, she may be observant, but she can fall for things the same way anyone else can. For Lydia character, it's like learning to actually just move on from her flaws and just observe things and not be basically manipulated by all these guys who are trying to use it for their own reason, which includes Beetlejuice. And just learn to deal with her flaws. And for Delia, it's learn to deal with her husband dies, and she does the big theatrical thing rather than actually trying to deal with the reality of it. And then eventually she has to kind of deal with the reality of it. And the fact that they use the husband, Charles, originally they see his death as, because they can use the actor, they see his death in stop motion animation, and then because he gets eaten by a shark, the top half is gone, it's just a body that's going around, and so you follow this person without a body throughout the film as he's trying to deal with the afterlife, which is a hilarious gag that never stops and funny. Of course, there's also Beetlejuice as well. Beetlejuice is actually, in this one, he's dealing with just the afterlife. He's now got his own business for bioexorcisms. He's now kind of a bit more organised, but he's still very slipshod. He's still got the feeling he's making up as he goes along. He's got his workers who do deal with the phone, and they're all those guys with the little heads from the first one, and they're all in business suits, and the leader's Bob, who is basically canon for Beetlejuice at all times, and becomes a very sympathetic character and leads to the best joke at the end. Beetlejuice is still as close as ever, and you find out he's an ex. He was suggesting the first one he had a wife, And this one, she's coming back to get soul, and you get a great flashback to his seduction, where he starts out as a grave robber, and during the plague, and you see his seduction with the wife and how what the wife wants from him, and you see the origins of Beetlejuice. But he hasn't learned anything. He's still Beetlejuice. He's still just this character who's a chancer and who knows everything about his world, but isn't going to move on to the next stage of life, after life, which other characters can do. And he hasn't gained a clue. He just still exists and still manipulates everything, and he's still this figure of chaos. And yeah, Michael Keaton is a lot of fun playing the character again. He's a lot of fun with it. But he's a character in the film. He's not. They don't try and make it, oh, it's a Beetlejuice film. The first one, he was a character in the film. It was about Maitland, and this one is about Deetzies. But he's still the character who's the chaos around it, who solves problems, creates problems. He's not entirely interested in a lot of the problems. He just deals with it for his own reasons. And he's still kind of hung up on Lydia a little bit. And he's almost a stalker at the beginning of the film. And she has to deal with him as well as dealing with the guy Rory. So the Beetlejuice character is in it, but he's not. He's certainly Batman in Batman Returns in the sense of he's really important, but he's not the full thing. Even though he's a title character, he's kind of like Tim Burton tends to have his central characters almost like Mad Max in George Miller films, where Max is like very important, but it's not always the main thrust of the story. And that Beetlejuice, this one's the same way. He's not the main thrust. Even the first one wasn't the main thrust of the story. And he has his problems. And one of the funniest gags is he's getting chased by his ex-wife who's trying to hunt him down to steal his soul. But he's still obsessed with other things entirely, and half the time he forgets about it. And he's like, even within a thing where he's getting chased, he'll just go to the bathroom because he's so weird and odd. You've also Willem Dafoe as a cop who was once an actor and who has all the actorly poses, and you've got lots of really fun characters and really fun situations, and the situation resolves itself. It's one of those films that it's not as chaotic as you probably expected from a Beetlejuice sequel, but it's probably there's more character stuff than you expect. So I think it's actually stronger than people are giving it credit for just now, which is something that happens with Tim Burton films a lot, actually. A lot of the time they come out and say, they're okay, and then later it's like, oh, that's actually quite good. It's that kind of film where, yes, it's got some flaws, but it doesn't really matter because the stuff that works really works. And you've also got the baby Beetlejuice, which is used for 2 scenes, but it really delivers. The other good thing is, the film knows you've seen the first one. It'll bring back things from the first one, but it's not going to have them dominate if you don't need them in the story. Like, the sandworms are back, but they're not in it for that long. And they don't try and force them into the story when they're not needed. So yeah, it's a very enjoyable film. Very good. The Killer is probably one of the more controversial of the two, because people just did well for box office wise with reviews. The Killer was released in Peacock. It was obviously a lower budget than we would have liked, and you get middling reviews, but it's a John Woo film. There was lots of fun John Woo stuff in it. There's lots of things that really deliver in this film that are very John Woo. The whole thing about how he suggests emotion with his characters and the way he shoots a scene. No one else shoots a scene like John Woo. No one else shoots it with that kind of sentimentality and longing and sense of like romantic disappointment and romantic aspiration, even though it's a cynical world. No one does that like John Woo. So even in this film, even if he doesn't have trouble young fat in this one, he still has a lot going on. He still knows it's a John Woo film, and so it makes it, even though the film has some problems, those things come through. His stylizations come through, it's a well cast film. The actors in it are enjoying themselves. No, they don't have the iconic thing of Chow Yun Fat in that part. They're not trying to be. I mean, Natalie Emmanuel is the new killer, and she's a completely different character. She's not trying to be Chow Yun Fat. It's a different character. It's the same situation where it's a character who's been a killer for a while and starting to get tired of it, and starting to discover their soul again. But the situation she's in is completely different. It's not. It's basically it's in France. There's lots of different gangsters and different people importing heroin. So it's a different crime world, probably more brutal. She's dealing with all these killers all the time, and she can take them all out. She knows what she's doing, but it's a much more cynical world. The person giving her the job is played by Sam Worthington, and he's having a ball in this one because he gets to be a villain. Because this character, obviously from the start, he's the villain. They don't even try and hide it. He's the villain. In the original, the guy who gives him the job is actually a decent guy who shares the same beliefs as the killer. In this one, no. The guy giving him the job is a villain. And Worthington, who tends to do better, he's actually got parts that are less heroic, is really enjoying being the villain. He just doesn't care. He's got an Irish accent, not the best Irish accent, but it's okay. But he's enjoying himself, and you can tell he's enjoying himself. There's a detective who's chasing the killer down, and he's a black French detective, and he's really good. I mean, the one thing this film does better than the original is the detective chasing down the killer is a better character. Because Danny Lee in the first one was enjoyable, but Chow Yun Fat took up so much of the room in that film. And Danny Lee's an okay actor, and he get elevated by Chow Yun Fat. But if you look at Hard Boiled a year or two later with Tony Leung with Chow Yun Fat, you have two actors of a certain level doing it, rather than just one and an actor at a bit lower level. In this one, you've got a really good detective character, an actor. I mean, he's less interesting things to do, but he's like obviously a better actor than Danny Lee. The problem with this film is the plot is kind of obvious. You know the villain is straight away. You can back and forward try to figure out stuff, but who's guilty, who's not. The girl who gets blinded is less innocent than she was in the first one, but it's still a case of she was in over her head with her boyfriend, and it was like a mistake rather than a sign of a character who is deeply flawed. And that idea is the killer's trying to save her because she's not quite in the game yet, really, and she's trying to save part of herself. The story beats are very different from the original. There's obviously less money for this one, so that there's less epic action scenes, so they have to go more of an atmosphere. And since this is John Woo in Paris, he can fulfill his Jean-Pierre Melville fantasies with all these different shots in Paris. He's having a ball with all these shots. He's doing all the romantic stuff he loves to do. There's some absurd things where she's falling, she's coming down this basically this big sheet of material. It's just as if it's a rope, but it's all romantic. It's almost like a scarf floating around, things like that. Woo's having a time of his life in a lot of these things. He's enjoying it with his action scenes because John Woo knows what he's doing. The only thing with the action scenes is, in the end scene, they give the killer a really uncomfortable looking costume. That means she's had problems moving sometimes. You can tell sometimes it's like a skin tight leather is maybe not so great for an action scene. And at times it looks like the actress is in problems moving in the costume. Which takes away from the fantasy of it a little bit sometimes, but generally it's all well done. And even if you ignore some of the more torturous plotting, which is easy to do because Woo's really about the set pieces and about the small moments with the different characters and the Woo stuff. Like even he seems to know that this plot is just the excuse. So every so often he has to come back to it. But it is something that lets the film down a little bit more, because he has to kind of deal with this plotting thing once in a while, and he has to deal with like the characters and why the Worthington character is such a scumbag every so often. And I don't think he's that interested, but he does it as a professional. Eric Canton has shown up as one of the villains as well, and most of the villains are enjoyable character actors who get to have a good time in France doing these character actor parts. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves. It's a really well made, fun movie. It's not a Passion original, but it's still well done. It's still a John Woo film. And if you watch it as a John Woo film rather than being trying to be the killer again, you'll have a lot more fun with it. It's just almost like it shares a couple of plot points with the original, and that's it. Apart from that, it's a completely different film. It's basically, you have this church shootout at the end, which isn't done the same way as the original. It doesn't have the same resolution as the original. Everything is different beyond the basic setup, which is the best way to do it if you're a director going back to do one of your own films. Change it all apart from the basics. So yeah, both these films are enjoyable, but I'd say Beetlejuice is the... If you have to choose one, Beetlejuice is the one to see. The Killer is enjoyable, but some of its flaws does drag it down a little bit. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back with some more later on. Bye for now.